So obviously, I love to draw portraits, and I love to draw portraits for many reasons. One, they are the most challenging to get right because we all spend our time looking at faces. And so I think faces and actually full figures are some of the more challenging things to draw because when something is off, it's totally obvious and even distracting to the viewer. So you really do have to know what you're doing if you're going to make a portrait. The other reason is because I find that people are really drawn and interested in portraits. When I worked in the galleries, I used to watch visitors walk through the spaces because my desk was in the space. And I noticed that if there was a portrait in the gallery, they would always spend more time with the portrait than the other subjects in the gallery. And I even did a little informal timer study when we switched between having a regular exhibition to a portrait exhibition, and found that people spent more time in the gallery space when we had just the portraits on exhibit. In turn, though, I found that we had the least sales during that exhibition, that, going into portraiture, your sales are going to be the lowest, but it is one of the more interesting of the subject matters. I became really interested in how the viewer responds to art after sitting in the gallery and watching people move through the space. So I started reading a little bit about neuroaesthetics, and one book that I read was called The Psychology of Art and the Evolution of the Conscious Brain by Robert L. Solso. Solso is how you spell the last name. And it's kind of an old book at this point, but the research is still really interesting. So they did study what happens to the brain when an artist draws a face versus someone who is not trained in art. And what they noticed is that a non-artist or inept artist might copy a face feature by feature without attending to a deeper meaning behind a face or an aesthetic interpretation of the person being represented. But maybe the genius of an artist is their ability to see well beneath the surface of their models to divine an intrinsic character of those whom they paint, or to uncover personality traits of people that might be made manifest on canvas. So they're suggesting that artists don't see the world differently, they think the world differently, which is really fascinating. They also say things like, when you look at a picture of a face, it's not just the visual side of your brain that's livened up. It's not just the part that's looking at lines and colors and shapes, but also the side of the brain that's looking for facial recognition, trying to figure out who this person is, who are they, where do they live, how are they feeling, and just all those sorts of details are coming up to mind. Some other things that I've noticed really special about portrait artwork is that it's always been considered quite a gift or a present if you take the time to paint a portrait of somebody. There was a whole Big Bird, Mr. Rogers episode that talked about that once, which I thought was really cool. And it's also there have been studies about how spending time with portraits builds empathy because we're spending time looking at and connecting with others. And I've noticed more and more how much portraiture is being used in things like marketing, that people like seeing pictures of other people, other faces. We are sort of hardwired to want to connect by looking at each other. So those are all the reasons why I think drawing portraits are so interesting and so fascinating and such a great subject to work on. And even though it's one of the last subjects to sell, I still have to stay true to my artistic self, and I want to draw portraits because I think they're really interesting and valuable and challenging and really contribute a lot to the world around us and our connection with each other.